Hello, my name is Jack Ward, and today we are going to reverse CrackMe with Ghidra. On the last video that I posted, you all left a lot of comments, and I want to take a look at some of them. First comment, is this for real? Yes, it very much is for real. That thumbnail really brings me back to the '09 days of YouTube hacking tutorials. Thanks, that's what I was going for. Took 6 minutes to get to some useful parts. Requirement 1 seems to be have an operating system, and even then it seems to imply that it only works on Linux, while in fact it works perfectly fine on Mac too. That's an amazing point, thank you for bringing that up. And you're going to see that in this video, I've changed the requirements to show that you can use all operating systems. That's a very good catch, thank you for bringing that up. I am your everyday software developer and I need this, thank you. No, thank you. By the way, regarding open the executable in the code browser, try and double click on the executable or drag and drop it onto the code browser icon. That's an amazing suggestion. I tried it, it works. Thank you for that suggestion. Excellent overview. Thanks for doing this. No, thank you. Do you have a recommended setup for Windows boxes and Proxmox to perform close-to Linux containers? I don't have any good window containers recommendations right now. If I find anything, I'll put up a video about it. That is something I would be very interested in. Can I install this on JDK12? You can install it on JDK12, but you're going to run into a lot of user interface issues. I suggest using JDK11. Alright, well, let's jump into it. So the requirements for this tutorial is any operating system that can have the JRE and the JDK installed, have Ghidra installed. And I expect you to have a basic knowledge of Ghidra, and if you're lacking some of that knowledge, that's fine. You can check out some of my previous videos, and then I will also be providing you with a link to download the CrackMe series that we're going to be using for this exercise. So please check out some of my previous videos. And also, if you could, like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know that you guys like these videos and that it is something that I should continue doing. Your feedback is very important to me. So, you can use any operating system that you can install the Java software development kit and the runtime environment on. I have Ubuntu up there, but you can use any Linux distribution you want to, any Windows distribution you want to, or Mac. Alright, so the biggest requirement is the fact that you have Java installed, Java SDK, Java JRE. And then you also have Ghidra installed. And then I'm going to ask that you download the following executables from GitHub. These are the executables we are going to be going through. This lesson, we're going to look at 00 through 04, a grand total of 5 executables. Alright, so what do you say? Let's get to it. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to ask that you guys do is go to that link that I provided earlier to a GitHub page. This GitHub page, which you can see up here in my address bar, is going to lead you to this GitHub page. And I'm going to ask that you download CrackMe 00, 01, 02, 03, and 04. Those are the 5 CrackMes that we are going to be doing during this tutorial series. I have installed them, I have downloaded them, and I've put them into this tutorial folder. This is where we're going to be launching the CrackMes from. So let's get a real quick idea of what the CrackMes are. So I'm going to CD into that folder. And then I'm going to go into my tutorial folder. Now that I'm in the tutorial folder, I'm going to do a directory search just to make sure that they're there. So let's take a very quick look at the very first CrackMe, CrackMe00.exe or 0x00.exe. It's very simple. It pops up with CrackMe level and then it asks for the password. And this is where we are meant to guess the password. Unfortunately, I do not know the password. This is where the reverse engineering is going to come into play. We're going to open up CrackMe 0x00.exe and look on the inside and see what it is expecting to receive. 0, 0 is the easiest, and it progressively gets harder from 0, 0 down to 0, 9. This is overall relatively easy CrackMe series, so 0, 9 should be relatively easy for us to go through if you follow along with the instructions that I provide. Alright, I'm going to leave that up in the background, and I'm going to run Ghidra. So I have Ghidra installed. I even made a shortcut and put it on the desktop. If you don't have Ghidra installed yet and you don't have that shortcut, go back to some of my previous videos. Okay. So the first thing we're going to want to do, make a new project. We're going to do a non-shared project. Project's name is going to be CrackMe. Click on finish. We now have a project. Now that we have a project, we can select the 5 going from 0, 0 to 0, 4, drag and drop them into our active projects. Alright, the batch file asks which ones we want to import. We want to import all of them. Alright, 5 files have been imported. So, as one of the commenters said earlier, you can double click and or drag this onto the code browser, which is the green dragon. Alright, it has not been analyzed, and we want to analyze. We're going to click yes. I like this function down here, fourth from the bottom, the Windows PE x86. I always select that one. Let's click on analyze. So at the bottom right hand side of your screen, you're going to see the progress bar going from 0 to 100% multiple times. Alright, this always pops up. I've learned that when I click OK, nothing bad happens to the program. Everything continues to run fine. I might fix that error in the future, but it's not an issue at this moment. Alright. In other videos, I've gone through the Ghidra interface and done a Ghidra overview. So if you want to go back and learn a little bit more about the user interface, please go back to that video. I'm going to skip all that and I'm going to go straight into the main function. So I'm going to open up the exports. I'm going to go into the main function here. I'm going to come over here into my decompile window. I see the CRT startup. We're going to click into there. And then I'm going to scroll down in the CRT startup function. I'm going to find the main function. Main function is somewhat near the bottom. It's one of the last ones that is ran before it actually exit this function. So let's go ahead and double click on this main one. And this is where the heavy lifting happens inside of this particular executable here in this main function. So let's take a real quick look at it. We see that we got a couple strings here. We got CrackMe and password. Well, let's jump back into our command prompt real quick, and I'm going to clear this by typing in CLS, and I'm going to run CrackMe again. So we see that what we see here is the same thing that we see here in the command prompt. CrackMe 00 with request a password. So I do believe that this is a print command. So what I did is I hit L for label, and I went ahead and relabeled it, something that I understand. Printf is very easy for me to understand, so I went ahead and inputted that there. And then the next thing is, whenever I see the command prompt, it is now blinking, waiting for my input. So the next command must be something with receiving my input. So let's take a look at it. So this .text, it doesn't transfer over, it doesn't tell me exactly what it is, so I have to kind of guess what it is. But looking at it, it is expecting to receive a string, and it is going to store it in a local variable. And the way that I highlighted all the local variables is I clicked the middle click on my mouse and it highlighted all 3 instances of it. So now that I'm looking at it, I believe this is a scanner function, which is looking for a string and is going to store it inside of my local variable. So what I want to do is I want to hit L, and I actually want to type in my input here. Alright, so that's going to be my input, and I do believe this is a scanner function. So I'm just going to do scanf. I'm going to call it scanf. Sometimes I call it scan, sometimes I call it scanf. But what is going to happen, it is going to put my input that I'm typing in into a variable called my input. So let's take a look at this. I see that my input also shows up here and also shows up with a number as well in this parameter listing. And then we have a dot text. And then this, once I middle click, is an integer. So now that I'm looking at it, my input and this, I do believe that it is comparing these two strings to be exact. So I'm going to call this a string compare. Once again, I hit L so I could relabel it. I'm going to call it string compare, in which it is going to compare these two and see if there's any differences. So if there are 0 differences, it's going to come back with an integer of 0. So I'm going to call this result. Alright, so if this string compares and it sees that there's no differences, it's going to come back with a 0. Subsequently, if we go into this if statement, well, if the result equals 0, then the password is okay. So that kind of verified my thought process that this is comparing. So let's give it a shot. Let's put this in as our password. Let's come down to our command prompt. I still have it up from earlier if you don't run it again real quick. And let's go 250382. All right, we have completed the first one. Let's move on to the next one. So 00 is complete. Congratulations, you just reverse engineered CrackMe 0x00.exe. Alright, so last time I dragged and dropped onto the dragon. I'm going to double click this time. This has not been analyzed. Would you like to analyze it now? Yes. Scroll down, click the fourth to last, hit analyze. So if you did double click and your screen came up blank, that's fine. Just go to file on the top left hand side and open it up again. It will open up and it will give you the chance to analyze it. Alright, let's go back into the main CRT startup. Let's go into CRT startup over here. Scroll down until we see the main function, double click into it. Oh, this looks much like the same thing, so let's go and start relabeling. First thing we see is that print statement of the CrackMe level 01 with the print statement of password. This looks a lot like the same scanner from the last example, except this time instead of expecting a string, it looks like it's expecting an integer. But still, this looks like that it's going to scanf whatever I type in as an integer and save it into a variable that I'm going to call my input. Alright, so if my input equals this hex character, then the password is okay. But what I'm going to try is I'm going to input that text character exactly as it is seen. So I'm going to run CrackMe 01, and all I did is hit tab to get it to autocomplete. Alright, so I am looking at this as I am typing it in, and I see letters. So when I hit enter, it should give me invalid password because what we are expecting here in the code is an integer. This hex has characters in it. Characters and letters. It has letters, so that cannot be the right answer. So let's hover above it and see what our tooltip displays. Our tooltip displays decimals in that center column of 5247. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. And if I see this little arrow, it's going to point me right here. I'm going to right click on the assembly code. I'm going to come down to convert, and I'm going to convert this into a unsigned decimal. It's going to give me the unsigned decimal here and here. So that hex value was converted into that decimal, and that looks like an integer, and I believe that very well could be our answer. So let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Let's go 5274. Hey, password okay. We've completed another CrackMe series. 01 is complete. So we're going to go ahead and close out of this. I'm going to save the changes because why not? And let's go into 02. I'm going to drag it and drop it onto the dragon. It has not been analyzed. That's fine. Let's analyze it. Scroll down, fourth from the last. Click it and then hit analyze. Alright. PDB error. That's fine. I am okay with that at this moment. Let's expand exports. Let's go into main CRT setup. go into CRT setup again, scroll down until we see the main function. Let's click into it. All right, and we already know what to do. Even though we've done this a million times, I always like to label everything, because in the future, if it pops up again, I want it to already be labeled so I don't have to worry about it and I'm not confused. So far it looks the same. Scan F, same thing as last time, with our %sign D to the local variable that I want to call my input. And then if my input equals this, password is okay. All right, so from last time we understand that %D means we're looking for an integer and that this is not an integer. So let's hover above it and we see the decimal character. Something interesting about this one is when we click on it and we follow this arrow and we try to come here, so we can right click on it and change it from a hex value to a unsigned decimal. It does not show up as an unsigned decimal. What it is doing here is pointing to where it is on the stack, so we cannot as easily transfer it or translate it into that decimal that we did where we right clicked last time and went to convert and did decimal. Look at the unsigned decimal on this one, it just doesn't work. But what we can do is we can hover over it and then we can look at what the decimal character would be. So let's hover over and we got 338724. So let's jump over here real quick. Let me see, we're working on number 2. CrackMe.exe 338724. Let's enter in 338724. Password okay. We've completed yet another one. Let's close out of it and keep moving along. 02 is complete. Let's go into 03. I'm going to double click on it this time. All right, would you like to analyze it? Yes, scroll all the way down, fourth from the last. Click it on. Analyze. All right, warning, that's fine. Open up exports. Go into main CRT. CRT startup. Scroll down, find main, go into main. All right, I'm going to relabel this again. Printf. We now know exactly what this does. Done it a million times. I'm going to rename this to my input. And then, oh, there's nothing that says password is complete. Instead of it saying that password is correct, it now has us going to another function called test. And what we are passing in there is we're passing my input and we are passing this hex character. Now, if we hover above this hex character, we see that the decimal is the exact same as the answer from last one. So chances are that this is the answer and we're complete. But we're going to jump into test real quick to see exactly what is going on. And it seems that there's an if statement and an else statement that leads to this function that passes in this garbled string. All right, so we do know that param1 was what we passed in. So I'm going to go ahead and write in, I'm going to go ahead and change the label of param1 so I know it is my input that I brought in from the previous function. If we want to see the previous function, we can always hold down the Alt key and then hit the left key on our keyboard, and it will do the last couple mouse clicks, but after a while it will go back one function to your previous function so you get an idea of exactly what your inputs were. So our first parameter that we passed in was my input, followed by a second parameter, which very well could be the key or the answer that we're looking for, or the password. So let's go in here and I'm going to go ahead and label that second one to be possible password, because it very well could be the password. So now we see that if my input equals the possible password, it goes into shift and it passes this. So I really quickly want to take this, whatever this is, I'm going to highlight it, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it onto a notepad. It is interesting and it's something that I might want to look at later. All right, so it's currently on the notepad. Let's enter into shift. Okay, so we're setting up some variables, some local variables. we're making this equal 0, and then while true, so run, period, while true is true. So this is automatically going to start up and it's going to continue. While true, svar equals text param1. Once again, we have this dot text. Pretty much anything that involves a string in Ghidra is automatically translated to dot text. It can be a print, it can be a scan, it can be a compare. Ghidra translates it to dot text, so we have to do a little bit of work to figure out exactly what it wants. We do know that it has an output of an svar, and we do know that that svar is a size. Whenever I see dot text that puts out a size, I'm expecting it to be a string length. And seeing that we have a string inside of, or a character array, aka a string, inside of the parentheses, I really do believe that this is going to be a string length. So I hit L, let's go ahead and label it string length. And thus, this variable is just going to be the length. So if the length is 12, this answer right here should be 12. So if the length is greater than or equal to this local variable, then break. So we can see that this is going to be a counter. This is going to be a loop in which it is going to increment this local variable +1 every time that it goes through that loop. So we're going to go ahead and label this as counter. We're going to see that the counter gets relabeled up here to 0. So this is going to be 0 until it goes through the loop. Then it will become 1. Then it will become 2, 3, and so forth. So if length is greater or equal to 0 at this moment, or I'm sorry, if length is less than or equal to 0 at this moment, then break. So that would mean that length is null, and if null, then go ahead and break out of it. But if there's any length to it all, meaning that this is bigger than 0 characters, then let's continue on. So we are indeed going to continue on, in which we have this local, then we have this counter, and then this param, and this counter -3. All right, so the param and counter. So right now, the counter is at 0. So the character at this character array at slot 0, we want to add +3. Quite confusing, isn't it? And then whatever this +3 is, we are going to put it into what seems to be this character array that has 120 spaces available, or 120 locations available. We're going to put it into slot 0 of that. So let's go ahead and rename this to something different. This is going to be an array. This is going to be a character array. So I'm going to call this char array or char array. All right, so char array, put it in there. And then let's increment the counter. Okay. So we are taking that garbled string from earlier, and we are running it through character by character, and then subtracting 3, and then having it as a different character array. In which, what we do at the very end is we are going to print that character array into this %s, and then we'll do a new line return, and then we will go back. So what is exactly in that garbled parameter that we saw earlier? In order to go back 1, what I'm going to do is, instead of hitting alt left arrow 100 times, what we can do is we can click on this until we see the arrow inside of the assembly, and right click on here. Let's go to references and find references to shift, and then we can double click on that and it'll take us back to where we were earlier, which is one function back at this moment. So if input and password are the same, it goes into shift, and then it changes that parameter and saves it as character array. It changes this parameter by -3 for every character, then puts it in the character array, then prints character array. So we need to figure out what this is when we take every single letter and add or subtract 3 to it. So the best way that I know how to do that is with CyberChef. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to minimize you for the time being, and I'm going to close all the way out of you. Let's go into Cyber Chef. So you can jump on Google and type in Cyber Chef inside of Google and it'll automatically pop up, or you may go directly to the website. So I'm going to place my input in here and I'm going to have auto bake on. So anytime that I make a change, it's automatically going to do the translation for me. So Cyber Chef is an amazing tool that does a lot of the encryption, decryption processes that normally would take a script to be built in order to translate. So I do believe that this is obscured or obfuscated in some sort of way, in which I think that it is subtracted by an integer of 3. So I'm going to come down here to encryption and encoding, and then I am going to find where it says subtract. My apologies. It is not encryption and encoding. We're going to go into arithmetic and logic. And in arithmetic and logic, we have sub, S-U-B. I'm going to click and drag it into the recipe. So when we were in Ghidra, we saw that it was shifting by 3, negative 3, subtracting 3. Let's jump into here. Let's try that again. Jump into here. It's not a hex that we're subtracting by. We're subtracting by a decimal, in which we are subtracting by 3. And hey, there we go. Password is okay. So when we come back into Ghidra, we now know that this parameter that is being passed is actually a password okay parameter once it is, well, once the math is being done. So let's go back. And then right here, I'm going to put a pre-comment by hitting the semicolon, ensuring that we have pre-comment selected. And I am going to put that right there. So this password is okay. Subsequently, what do we think this one might be? Well, let's take a real quick look. I double-clicked on it. I found it in the assembly code. I'm highlighting it. Right-click, copy. Let's throw it really quickly into Cyber Chef and see what it would be. It would be invalid password if things didn't go the way that we had planned. So let's go ahead, click in here, pre-comment of invalid password, click OK. There we go. So if input equals a possible password, go into this, do all the math, and then come out to the translation of this equaling password OK. So if it's not equal, then we go into invalid password, pass that in. It does subtract 3 to all the characters, and it comes up with the actual text of invalid password. Hey, congratulations, you completed 03. Let's move on to the last one, 04. All right. I think we are good with Cyber Chef for the time being. We're good with the notepad. Goodbye, notepad. And I'm going to drag and drop onto the dragon. Do you want to analyze it? Yes. Scroll down to the bottom. 4th from the end, at least for me. Hit analyze. PDB warning. Okay, thank you very much. Let's expand exports. Click on main CRT startup. Go into CRT startup. Scroll down, find main, double click. All right, and start renaming stuff. Print F. Bam. Scan F. Bam. This is not shift, and this is not, hey, the password is correct. Thank you for playing. No, this is a function of check. So let me go ahead and relabel this real quick, my input, and then let's see what is inside of this check. We double click, we go in, and we see we're setting up our variables. We had a couple variables here that could be counters. While true, so it's automatically going to go into this svar, which is going to be a size text that has param as a parameter. So this is going to be that character array. So this dot text that puts out a size t variable. I am looking at a string length. So I hit L, rename the string length. I'm going to hit L on this one. I'm just going to call this one length, or len. And we've seen this before. This is another for loop in which if length is less than or equal to this counter. So we're going to rename it to be counter. Then print password is incorrect. Okay, so if it's null, we're printing password incorrect. If there's zero length of this string, password is incorrect. All right. Now, for every character in this character array, we are going to call it local 11. All right, so I'm going to call this char in array. Very cool. And then for every char in array, it is an integer placeholder that goes to local 8, and it's a text. Now this one threw me off for a little bit, but as I started thinking about it and working my way through it, I came up with a couple ways around this one. This one is something that I did not know right off top of the bat. I had to do some research. But if I middle click, I see that char array starts at the top and it ends here. And then we have this %d. We all know that that is the cast or the placeholder for an integer. And then we see local d. That doesn't really exist. It gets initiated up here, but it doesn't really exist until this point. But it does exist further down. So I came to somewhat of a conclusion that this character array, which is a character right now, is casted or formatted into being an integer. And then since this local 8 is an integer, that it is then saved as local 8, and it continues down the path as an integer. So this pretty much changes it from an array to an integer. So I'm going to go ahead and relabel this real quick. I'm going to change this to, I'm just going to call it int. Okay, so it changes it to an integer. And then I did some more research. I really wanted to know what I should label this .text function. And I think I found it. So after a lot of Googling, I was able to come to this website, tutorials point. And you can look at the address bar and copy the link and go to the same link that I went to. But something that I've kind of looked at is it's not a S print or a VS print or an SN print because it doesn't really print anything to the console, but it does do a scan of sorts. So I saw this. The first one here is a character that points to a string. Well, if we go back into Ghidra, we see more or less the same thing. Here is our character array. It is a character and it is a pointer. And then let's come back into it. Then it does a character format. Well, this looks just like a format. We are using a string with a formatter identifier. And then the only thing that we're missing is this third one. But there are some dots to say that there could be a third parameter. So when I scrolled down and actually looked at the example, I see that this example has the string of the day, month, day, year, week, day, month, day, year, and then in a string copying it into DTM. So DTM is now this string. And then I see scanf, and this is what I believe that we have in this CrackMe executable, in which it is taking DTM, which is currently that, and then it is formatting it to this, and then saving it as a character output of this, and then an integer output of this, which is exactly what we're doing here. We're taking the characters, formatting it as an integer, then saving it as an integer. I really do believe that we can call this scanf. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here. We're going to put it into here. And that is exactly what I'm calling it. I'm going to call it scanf. That's, once I look at it, that is what I determined that it does, and it makes perfect sense. So this character in an array, which is an integer, we are actually casting or formatting as an integer and saving as an integer inside of a variable that I've called int. And then int comes down here. So we are going to add int to whatever local variable C is. And if we highlight it, local variable C is currently 0. So we're saving 0 plus that into local variable C. So what this seems is that we are adding a total to the new total. So I'm going to rename this to be total real quick. So old total plus our new int equals new total. And then at the very end, after we iterate through that a couple times, what we will see is that the total will add up to this number. Let's go and click on this number. I'm going to double click. Didn't really do anything, but I do see that the arrow is here pointing to this. I'm going to come here, right click, convert to unsigned decimal. That changes that to 15, changes that to 15. So if that plus the previous total, let me rephrase that. So we take what is currently being passed through the loop, add it to the previous total to get the new total, and if the new total is 15, then we break. All right, so let's go ahead and try it, and then it increments the counter. So we are going to go CrackMe .ex or CrackMe04, the last one. Let's run it. So the password is 15, right? So we should be able to enter in 15, and it would be correct, right? The password isn't 15. This is not a string character. These are integers. So what we've actually done is we've entered two integers of 1 and 5. And what it is doing here is it is taking 1, passing it through, making it 1 plus 0 equals 1, so the total is 1. Then it takes 5. 5 plus 1 equals the new total of 6. So 6 does not equal 15. So what we need to do is we need to enter in some numbers that equal up to 15. So some numbers that equal up to 15 is, let's go with the numbers 9 and the number 6. 9 plus 6 equals 15. Hey, password okay. Let's do that again. Let's go 555. Password is okay. Let's try that again. Let's go 33333. All those added up in a loop at the very end should equal 15. We have completed exercise 4 of this CrackMe series. So thank you guys for joining with me. We went through CrackMe 0x00, 01, 02, 03, and 04. A grand total of 5, in which we learned a lot of different things. We learned about the scanf function. We learned about how it subtracted 3 from every single character in the character array, and how we can use CyberChef to determine how to best go about that. So I've had a lot of fun with this. Thank you guys for joining me. That is the end of this tutorial and this demonstration. If you have any questions, please drop them down into the YouTube comments below. And you can reach out at me at any of these social links at the bottom left hand side of your screen. And if you found this video enjoyable, or if you found this video educational, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And when you comment, please let me know where you ran into problems and if there's anything I can help out with. So, hey, thank you guys for everything. And until we see each other again, I'll see you next time.